Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
I'm a little under the weather, so if I sound sniffly, that's why. And don't hug me today. I don't want to get anyone sick on my behalf. Okay. I believe that we did some of the Rashis on verse 17, but not all. Does that sound right to everybody? I didn't have this book with me when I was teaching last week, so I didn't mark it up. But I think that we got through the first two Rashis, but not the last Rashi in verse 17. Can anyone confirm or deny?
We did not so.
Right. Did we do L'Dorotechem Chukat Olam?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Okay. So let me get the verse going so we can remind ourselves what's going on, and we'll do that Rashi. Okay? All right, so it's chapter 12, verse 17. Ushmartem et hamatzot. You will keep the matzot. We already read the Rashi that said you can read it not as matzot, but mitzvot, a wonderful midrash that just is how you're not supposed to let to delay the baking of the matzah, lest chametz happen. Don't delay the mitzvah, lest your own heart get too haughty and you'll choose not to do it, right? The chametz of the heart. So that was the interesting midrash Rashi brought. Ki be'etzem hayom hazeh, because on that very day, or on this very day, Hotzeiti et tzivotechem me'eretz Mitzrayim, I brought out your hosts, your hordes from the land of Egypt. Ushmartem et hayom hazeh, and now a second verb, use of shmartem, and you shall guard that day. When we talk about guarding a day, we're talking about observing the laws of, particularly the restrictions of, L'Dorotechem, for all of your generations, Chukat Olam, an everlasting law. Okay, that was the verse. And we are at the L'Dorotechem Chukat Olam, which is the third of three comments of Rashi on that verse. Okay. Tova, do you want to read? Let's give Tova a microphone. Okay. Joel, since there's a microphone there, do you want to read?
Ushmartem et hayom hazeh or L'Dorotechem?
L'Dorotechem.
L'Dorotechem chukat olam, lefi shelo ne'emar dorot vechukat. Olam al hamalacha.
Keep going. Few more words.
Okay. Ele al hachagiga.
Okay. So put a big comma there. So this is all a since da. What's going to come next is a therefore da. So let's figure out what the since is. Since what?
Since it doesn't say dorot, it says dorotechem, right?
Since it doesn't say quote dorot and quote chokat olam regarding the
work,
right? But rather on the
celebration.
Right. So what's that referring to? Go back to verse 14, everybody. Right. It's sort of wonderful and hard to do this stretched out over time because we forget just what it was a couple of verses ago, right? So this chapter has a lot of material regarding the observance of the Pesach then and in perpetuity. Back in 14, we had the following language. V'haya hayom hazeh, let this day be, lachem, for you, l'zikaron, as a remembrance. V'chagotam oto chag l'Adonai. You should celebrate it as a chag to God. L'dorotechem, same word as our phrase, for your generations. Chukat olam, and forever and ever to chaguhu. And what Rashi is saying is in that verse. Okay, I got the question to which Rashi is responding, which is silent. We already had L'Dorotechem and Chukat olam. Why do we need the words again? Right? In 14, we had the same phrase, L'Dorotechem, for your generations, Chukat olam. And Rashi doesn't say the question, but the question's there. And how come in our verse we have a repeat of that exact phraseology in a Torah text that we understand to be terse? And he says, because in that verse, the concept of the generations and this happening forever was only vis-a-vis chagotem, which is what? Celebration, this Paschal offering, the fun stuff of Yantif, and not regarding the what? The restrictions, the thou shalt nots, right? Every holiday in our tradition has thou shalts and thou shalt nots, right? Shamor and Zachor, right? Zachor is a thou shalt. You should remember Shabbat by saying Kiddush. Shamor is thou shalt not. I mean, it's phrased as a positive mitzvah, but it's about restrictions, right? It's not phrased as a you shall not. But lo tasu malacha, don't do labor on it, right? So, part of Pesach is the Seder. That's a convex thing. We're creating something. We're doing something. It's positive. Part of Pesach is don't eat chametz and don't do labor, lest you think that the ledorotechem, for your future generations, and the chukat olam forever was only enjoined upon the first part, the fun part. No. The Torah comes back and says, "Lachach." Put the mic a little bit closer. Yeah, mic a little bit closer. There you go.
Lachach chazar v'shina'o kan.
Right. In Rashi Hebrew, an aleph gets thrown into that verb that we normally don't do in either rabbinic or modern Hebrew. That verb shina'o is like to teach, like v'shinantam levanecha. So the Torah comes back, or actually it could be to teach or to repeat. It's unclear which way he means it. Go ahead.
Asharat kol malacha lo ya'aseh lo ledorot ne'emra. So it comes back and teaches us. It doesn't say
that one should not say.
One should not say.
Lachach chazar. Therefore, the verse repeated itself. Ushana okan, and either repeated here or taught again here. Lest shalot tomar, that you should not say. Quote. What does the Torah not want anyone to say? That the azhara.
That the warning of not to do any work. It does not apply to all future generations,
but rather Ella
lo toador.
So there are a lot of this one, right? So there's a double, if not a triple negative, right? The Torah comes back and says this so that you don't say that the warning about not doing work is not for generations. It actually is, right? It's something that it's not just that you have to observe the festival every year like this, but you have to observe the restrictions every year. To our ears, it just seems like a nonsensical question. Like, of course, like, why would we think otherwise? But Rashi is also trying to key into like the early DNA, the early creation of our festivals, where it was not at all clear, right, from the Torah's perspective, what it was that Jews, Israelites should be doing generation after generation to commemorate this. We've inherited a closed system. It is porous, but it's a system that has thou shalt and thou shalt nots. And we do the same thing every year, right? Your Pesach, thou shalt nots, unless you're changing your rule on kitniot, don't change from one year to the other. Well, when did that get established? Rashi's saying the repetition of the Dorotechem is showing that this is supposed to be for generations. Carl, let's give Carl a microphone. And then Tova.
So if I can be so brazen as to ask an additional question, maybe that Rashi didn't.
Be brazen.
The last part of the verse, where are we, has both Lidorotechem, which one might say is enough. That should stop there, because that means forever.
Yep.
Why does it go on to say Chukat Olam? That seems redundant.
Yeah.
So we must learn something from that it's different, not redundant.
Good, Carl. So what you're really asking is, why is Rashi sensitive to one but not both of the redundancies of these two phrases? Because it's a double redundancy. So it's two mentionings in verse 14 and verse 17 of a phrase, which in and of itself is redundant. L'derotechem means for your generations. L'chukat olam is a law forever, means for forever and ever. That's already redundant, and it's redundified by being repeated in the second verse. And I don't know why Rashi is not asking that question, right? It's a total. You can imagine a quantum universe where Rashi doesn't ask the question he does ask and just says, like sometimes the Torah, reinforces a concept a few verses later, but that he does ask about l'derotechem l'chukat olam, he doesn't hear. I can't explain why, but I'm certainly eager if anybody has a thought as to what the significances of those two phrases are. Tova and then Rebecca. You turn off.
Now that we're focusing on this Ushmartem, second Ushmartem, it also makes me feel like I feel more persuaded by the understanding of Ushmartem et Hamatzot as referring to the festival, because it's the same phrasing. It's parallel. It's making
Nice.
it parallel.
Very nice.
And therefore, it's like saying, it happened to be that during the festival of Matzot was when I took you out. That doesn't mean you stop observing that. Ushmartem hamatzot, but also ushmartem, this day that I took you out.
That's a great read, Tova. Thank you, Shakayach. Rebecca.
I kind of have a question, which is, he says that it's about the avodah, but the avodah is not mentioned in this line at all. It's mentioned in the previous pasuk, actually. So I'm wondering if that's something that he does often. I mean, he's entitled to do that, I guess, but it's actually showing up in pasuk Tetzayin.
I'm not sure I understand your question yet.
So my question is, the idea of melacha is mentioned in pasuk Tetzayin, but his interpretation of shmartem et dorotechem is pasuk Yud Zayin. So it's later.
Yeah, good. So 2 thoughts. One, like combine what you said and Tova said. It's almost as if Rashi is reinforcing that the phrase ushmartem et hamatzot is observe all of the restrictions and the laws of this holiday, which was mentioned in the previous verse, but it's in this verse that you get the repetition of l'dorotechem, and that ushmar, and that's what the shomer of shomering hayom is all about. The word malacha, right, does not appear, but he's understanding this concept of ushmartem et hayom to be about the restrictive parts of observing our holidays. Did that answer it? Not really.
Obviously, it does, but but it does say shmartem et hamatzot, not not the other stuff. So it's interesting. I don't,
Right. So remember that when we talked about ushmartem et hamatzot, there were 2 ways of understanding what it could mean. One is be careful in the baking of them, or be careful in observing the festival of matzot. And what does it mean to be careful about observing the festival of matzot? Avoiding chametz, not doing malacha, things like that. So, and Rashi gave both explanations for what ushmartem et hamatzot could mean. Before we go on, I see your hand, Barry. I'll put this in the WhatsApp chat, but I like doing it in person also. We meet next week, the day after Shavuot. And then I will not be teaching for quite some time because before I do the shul trip that some of you can be on, I'm traveling with Noah and Lev for Lev's bar mitzvah trip. So I'll discuss with Leonard to see if any of those classes you want to be on for, but we will not be meeting in Whiteman for quite some time because those classes are always on Zoom, right? So next week is the last class in Whiteman for quite some time. I'll put all the dates in the calendar, but just look for that in the WhatsApp chat. Okay, Barry.
So I'm seeing here, Shmartem l'dorotechem. This is something that it's our option. This is for us to do. It's for us to decide to do this. But the Hukat Olam, this is not to do with us. It is itself eternal. Whether we do it or we don't do it, it's still eternal.
Yeah, it's sort of up to us if, right? It's eternal on some level, and yet it doesn't exist unless we say something about it. I think I shared this as my sermon 2 weeks ago. I don't remember what I shared this idea recently, that there's a beautiful teaching about the difference, but the essential difference between Shabbat and Chag, and Chag is Mikra Kodesh. Call it or declare it sanctified. Shabbat is never described that way, and I forgot who this was described to. So, I think it was the Shem Mishmuel, Rabbi Shmuel Bornstein, who was one of the great Hasidic sages of the 19th century. He says the difference between Shabbat and Yontif are not just that there are a couple of leniencies with regard to Shabbat that are not there, with regard to Yontif that are not in Shabbat, but they're actually different conceptual ideas. Shabbat comes from creation. It's primordial. It pre-exists. Not only did it pre-exist Sinai and pre-exist Abraham, it pre-existed humanity. Shabbat was created before we were created on some level. I mean, even though God doesn't rest in the story until after we're created, the notion of there being a creation of 6 days and then a resting, that's a primordial grand thing. Shabbat would exist whether or not there were any Jew to observe it. What it would be doesn't even make sense to think through, but it's not dependent. The concept of Shabbat in God's world is not dependent on us. There is no Pesach without the Jews observing Pesach, right? Mikra Kodesh means you declare it holy and sanctified by the fact that you're observing it. And if all the Jews stopped observing Shavuot, the notion would disappear from reality. Whereas if you lean into this magical way of thinking, if every Jew stopped observing Shabbat, it would mean that Shabbat would be ignored, but it wouldn't disappear from whatever reality is beyond human comprehension. And so there is a chukat olam aspect to Chag, according to the Rabbi Shmuel Bornstein. Yeah, but only if we actually pay attention to it. It doesn't exist in the world without our investment. Norm, and then Alan?
A decade or two ago, the Catholic bishops in America determined that they were going to eliminate holy days of obligation, such as All Saints' Day and so forth, if less than a quarter of Catholics were celebrating them. And if it worked like that for the Jews, we would soon have only a very few holidays, and they would be in danger.
Yes. Right. I mean, a cousin to that idea is if we finally did which Larry Herman and others have been pushing us to do, which is to get rid of second day Yontif, and let's say all diaspora, Susan votes, and let's say all diaspora Jews decided in some Jewish papal decision that second day Yontif would stop being observed. I know this is going to sound obvious. Then it would just no longer exist. Then the day after the seventh day of Pesach would just be Tuesday. It would stop having any mamashut to it. It only has mamashut, that's some realness, because we do something about it. But what's that? It would be Maimuna, yes. But God forbid, all of humanity disappears, and in this kind of mystical idea, Shabbat still exists. It's a tree falling even if no one is hearing it, right? Alan.
The notion of the difference between Shabbat and Yom Tov, I think really comes out in the liturgy, and what you're saying just made me think of it, because what do we say? Mekadesh HaShabbat v'Yisrael v'Hazmanim. We do Shabbat because it comes from God, but then we praise the people because it's the people who declare the holidays. It's of a different level. It's not the same sanctity that's taking place.
That's lovely, Alan. We should go back in time and tell the Shemi Shmuel that he should have used the brachot of Kiddush to strengthen his point. Barry, is your hand up again or still? I couldn't tell. Looking for unmute, yes. Nope. Still muted.
Okay. You said it. The chukat, you used the word primordial. It exists, whether we schmarts them or not. Okay, that doesn't happen if we don't do it. But the chukat, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else in verse 17 before we go forward? Leonard, let's give Leonard a microphone.
Just happened to notice here that Ha'amek Davar on Chukat Olam says that what this means is both when in the land of Israel and not in the land of Israel.
That's the reason of the repetition, lest you think it's only, There are a lot of different ways of understanding why something might be repeated, right? Emphasis, you forgot you said it, or to teach a different rule. Good. All right, let's go to verse 18, right? Tova, you want to claim this verse?
בראשון ב14 יום לחודש בערב, תאכלו מצות עד יום ה21 לחודש בערב.
And the second one, by the way, just to be 100% precise, is ba'arev, because erev is a segulate noun, okay, 2 segels. And when it's in the pausal form, either at an etnachta, halfway through a verse, or a sof pasuk, it goes to arev, like lechem lachem, eretz aretz.
Okay, so Barashon, which is on the first of the month,
Actually the first month.
or the first month, Be'arba Asar, on the 14th day, Lachodesh of the month, Ba'erev, in the evening.
Good. And pause 1 second. Do you have the Unkelist there? Look how Unkelist translates the first word of the verse.
Let's see. Benisan.
Benisan. So Unkelist translates the word first into what was already then known as the name of the month, right?
Yeah.
The Torah has never heard of Nisan,
Yeah.
right? The Torah thought of it as the first month. So instead of using the Aramaic word for first, he says, it's in February. It's in Nisan. Okay, go ahead. What's that? I think first century. I can't remember if it was first century BCE or CE. My brain says first century, but I don't remember if it was before or after 0. Yeah. I don't remember. Unkelist is pre-Christian. Yeah. I think some of the names of the months appear in some prophetic texts, but I don't know that all of them do. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, בערב, לחודש בערב, then תאכלו מצות עד יום ה-1 ו-20 לחודש.
Pause 1 second. Adar certainly is biblical, right? Because the word Adar is all over Megillah.
Right.
But I think when like Jeremiah or Isaiah are talking about the festivals, they're still in the 1st, 7th, 9th category. They're not giving them the names. So at some point, between the 7th century BCE and 4th century BCE, names started to be used and recorded in the text. Sorry, go ahead, Tova.
Okay, תאכלו מצות עד יום ה-1. You shall eat matzot until the 21st day of the month in the evening.
Good. Okay. Is there anything new in this verse?
Well, the emphasis again on eating matzot during the whole period rather than just on the first day.
If my father were editing this paper, he would just cross out the line, right?
Repetitious.
Right. So I'm kind of setting up Rashi, and this is going back to Carl's question. Rashi himself is selective about which redundancies he's either troubled by or curious about, right? If this verse did not exist, we would not lack any information about how long Pesach is, right? But we're being told, if we go slow in the language, on the 14th day of the first month, in the evening, eat matzot. We knew that. How long does it last? Well, 14 plus 7 equals, right? Until the 21st day of the month and the evening. So all we're learning, you could make the argument that this is just a restating of Shivat Yamim Tochlu Matzot, right? So that's setting up what Rashi is going to try to derive from it. Leonard.
It looks like you actually supposed to do it for 8 days and not for 7. From the 14th to the 21st. Well, in the evening would be the 15th. Yeah, so from the 14th to the 21st is 8 days.
14 from 21 is 7.
I understand the point you're making, right? That basically, Ba'erev is being used in different ways in different halves of the verse. So, as the 14th day ends, Erev, you start eating matzot until the end of the 21st day, but that does not mean into the 22nd day. So you're right. Erev in the first part of the verse means how the beginning. Sorry, the end of the day that came before it, but you're not obligated to it. And Erev in the second half of the verse is referring to that exact day. Yeah, that's a weird thing that Erev is used 2 different ways in the verse. All right, before we look at Rashi, questions, comments, I see Rick.
Hi, good morning. Booker, so I figured I'd do some trope since you're saying there's nothing much to this sentence. So it starts with a pazer. Okay, starts with a pazer. So it dramatically calls attention to the first word there. The last pazer we had, unless I'm mistaken, but the last pazer that I see is in verse 2 of chapter 10. Ulama'an tisaper, tell your kids into their ears. And then the next pazer we have is coming up in 26.
You haven't had
Kaf
a pazer in
Zayin.
2.5 chapters?
Unless I missed one. Yeah.
Wow.
They're
Okay.
rare. And then the next one is 27. Va'amartem, it starts the verse again, and you should tell your people, tell the kids. So it's the emphasis is on the high points of the telling is what I get from that. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
There's been a request around the table that you lane that word, Rick, with a mighty and elaborate and mellifluous pazer.
Barishon is the way I would do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's several different versions of the pazer.
Yes.
My pazer is
Binder trope does 9. Da 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 da. I do 10. Da 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 da. So those are two variations. What?
My pazer, which I learned from my teacher Myrna Zeret, is Barishon.
Very nice. Yes. Very nice.
I shall shell it. Yeah. Yeah. It's like okay. Anything else that jumps to mind? I've predicted on all of our behalves where Rashi's going to go in the verse, but anything else you want to point out? The language, the structure, content. Okay, Tov, you prefer not to read the Rashi? You want to sign that out? Or you want to give it a shot?
Oh, let somebody else do it.
Okay, Marshall, you want to read the Rashi? Let's give Marshall a microphone. Okay.
Ad Yom Echad V'Esrim, Lama Ne'amar, why is this stated until the 21st day? V'halo Kavar Ne'amar Shivat Yamim. Did it not already say 7 days?
And can't we count, right?
Lefish Ne'amar Yamim, since it said days. Leilot Minayin, nights, from where do we know this? Talmud Lomar, the text teaches, Ad Yom Ha'echad V'Esrim B'Gomer, until that the eating of this unleavened bread extends also to the nights of the 7 days. Scripture therefore states here, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day in the evening.
Right. So in your own words, Marshall, what's Rashi's question and how does he resolve it? What notion is he saying the text is disabusing us of? We already had disabusing us of the notion that we don't have to do the shmirah, the protective part of the holidays forever. Therefore, the Torah comes back with lidrot echem lechukat olam. What might we have thought? We wouldn't have thought it, but what might we have thought had this verse not been here, according to Rashi?
Yeah, you only have to have matzot on during the day and not at night.
Right, and I would put it in implied only. You only two onlys, that you only have to only eat matzot and not chametz during the yamim, because it said shivat yamim,
right.
And maybe you thought that here yamim means actually daytime.
Yeah.
Now it's saying no, it's a full. It's from the 14th to the 21st conclusively, comprehensively. I'm not thinking straight, 100% straight today, so I apologize. I was east to officiate a cousin's wedding, and my cousin Simon flew in from Israel for the wedding, and spent Shabbat with us, and we drove several hours each way to the wedding, and he had a horrific cough and cold, and like the good Moshavnik that he is, was not covering his mouth and nose as often as he would, and we just were convinced that we were all going to get it, and we all got it. So that's why don't hug me today. But my brain is not operating at full speed. So where were we? What did I say? Inclusively, right. Lest you think that yamim here only means days and not nights. Therefore, it says, now I'll give you from 14 all the way to 21, everything in between. Okay. Anything on that, Rebecca?
Just wanted to point out that historically Rashi, at this time, there's already Islam. So maybe it has to do with Ramadan. I don't know if Ramadan existed at that point, but it might have to do with the fact that other religions do certain things only during the day and not night.
Meaning there's a concept that you might have obligations only when the sun is out, and therefore the answer is no, right? You can't get up at 3 a.m. and have a lachmaniyah on the fourth night of Pesach. So yes, Norm.
One of Rashi's grandsons takes the position that a day is actually not the evening and the daytime, but is the daytime and the evening. That is, that we change the day at dawn, not at dusk. And these verses would fit very well with that, these last two verses.
Is that Rashbam?
Rashbam.
Say more about that. That was Rashbam's understanding of how we should count our days?
That's his understanding of the verses in Bereshis about what a day is. And he takes that position that that's the way it is throughout the Torah. He doesn't live by that because he wants to be part of a community, but that's his understanding of what it means. Wow. I think he likes to be contrarian at times.
Well, when Rashi's your grandfather, you have to do something to make yourself stand out a little bit. Okay, good. That's all Rashi says in the verse. So unless there are no protests, we'll go to verse 19. We're making progress. Elon, I want you to read this verse as skillfully as Carlos Rodon laid down the angels last night.
There we go.
Yeah, I know.
And
it's not a class if I'm not talking angels.
Did you not go to any of the games?
Correct. I was east for the first two games, and tonight we have the annual meetings. I'm not going to any Angels or Dodgers games because the Dodgers games are Friday, Shabbat, and Erev Shavuot. Anti-Semites. Okay.
And you couldn't get them to do the annual meeting in Anaheim.
I talked about it. Jackie was considering it, but ultimately she decided not to.
Okay, here we go. Shuvat Yamin Sarlo Yematzei Bevatechem Ki Kol Ochel Machmetzet V'nichrata Hanefesh Hahi Me'edat Yisrael Bager Uve'ezrach Haaretz.
Okay.
7 days. What is Seor?
Seor. Okay, so if we look at how Onkelos translates Seor, we saw this earlier as well. Onkelos's translation of Seor is Chamir. Why should that ring a bell to you? Kol Chamira v'Chamia. When we do the search for the chametz and the burning of the chametz, we have a formula that if you say it in Aramaic, it's Kol v'Chamira v'Chamia di'ika birshuti. Any chamira and chamia that I have in my possession. Chamia is chametz because the tzadi in Hebrew is an ayin in Aramaic. Chametz chamia. So that's the actual food stuff that has already been fermented or already been chametzified. So what's then is chamira? What's that? What?
Leavening agent.
The leavening agent, right? So it's the stuff that leavens, right? So what leavens in strict halachic practice, what leavens is time. You don't need any yeast to turn the combination of flour and water into chametz, such that it would be prohibited on Pesach. All you need is time. But you go way back, and it shows you like how much our modern and pre-modern observance of the law is very different than the biblical notions. Chametz was something that was done to the combination of flour and water by seor, by some kind of a leavening or sourdough agent. I put an article in the Rashi chat a few weeks ago by my former teacher Moshe Benovitz, who did a fascinating review as to how bread was actually made and the starter and how it was kept for years and that there really was seor. You didn't eat the seor. Are there any bakers amongst us?
Yeah.
Rebecca's hand. Okay, go ahead, Rebecca. Take it away.
Because when we spoke about this I don't remember when it was exactly, about the difference between Seor and Machmetz, I later went on and did a little search.
Yeah.
And I didn't find anything linguistic, but I did find someone saying that the so, when you prepare sourdough, you bake, but you leave a little bit that you lashir batzad. And they were interpreting the word so from that root, nishar. So it's what you keep pulling to the side, which I don't know if that was sort of a baker saying. It wasn't a linguistic, expert, but I thought that was interesting. It's what you preserve from day to day.
Very interesting. Sometimes a shin is a shin and a sin is a sin, and sometimes not, right? So lahashir, to keep something around, like nishar, to stay, and seor might be entirely different roots because the shin is different, or someone moved the dot at some point. I want to see if BDB says anything about seor while we're talking about that. Was there another hand up? Yeah, Carl.
So while we're making too rapid progress here, one observation that despite their lack of knowledge of microorganism and scientific principles, they got it right that if you just leave stuff around in the air, things will happen. There's processes at work that you don't see and can't tell on the human scale. But
right, there's yeast everywhere, right, on our skin, right?
Well, and many other microorganisms as well, which leads to my next question, which is if there's all this concern about chametz in regard to grain and bread, but the fundamental principle of wine is fermentation by very similar microorganisms of grape juice. Why isn't that considered chametz? Because
I mean, the answer is going to be unsatisfying. It's because it isn't, right? It's because chametz was defined, for lack of a better word, as that process happening to grains and not happening to fruit. So it's the answer is just makes sense internal to the logic of our system. Doesn't mean it's not a good question, but it's like, but what then? Why are some insects kosher and why some are not? They are.
So hence we can
on Pesach the salt water or vinegar.
What about
when you put the herbs inside?
Yeah.
So you use vinegar, and vinegar is kind of like leaven of wine.
Right. Anyone dip their vegetables in vinegar?
Yeah.
Really? I've never heard of that. We use
I
salt
can
water.
show you the book.
So we're getting.
It's either salt water or vinegar.
Interesting. I never heard that. Yes, vinegar is the fermented outcome of grapes that didn't become wine, and so you might be able to use the same English and Hebrew word to describe the process that brought it to its orkanot regarding grains, and there are only 5 grains that can even become chametzified. It's going down. Leonard and then Rebecca.
Well, you have a good question, because the Karaites do exactly that. They don't have anything fermented, including wine.
On Pesach.
On Pesach.
Wow. God, every couple of months, the Karaites come back into our class. And it's really, does anyone talk about the Karaites more than Leonard Friedman?
Yes, absolutely. They even have a synagogue in Daly City.
In Daly City.
And 14 in Israel, many of them in Ashkelon, but some in Jerusalem.
Before you speak, I don't see an entry for Seor in the BDB, which makes me think that I'm not looking in the right place, because all of the entries are pointed as sh. What do you got there?
According to Klein over here, he has very conclusively says that for the word seor, which means leaven, of uncertain etymology.
Yeah, which gives more possibility to what you said, Rebecca, that maybe it is she'er. But I must be looking in the wrong place, because I can't imagine that he wouldn't actually BDB would not actually have defined it.
Are you looking with the vav or with that?
Both.
Yeah.
All of the entries are about she'er, meaning remnant or extra. Interesting. Okay. Yes, Rebecca.
Just a final. If you look at pickle jars from Israel, right? if they're made actually fermented in just salt, they're considered kosher for Pesach. The ones that have vinegar in them are not.
That's very interesting.
So it's scientifically
well,
not.
aren't some vinegars made from? Are there vinegars that are made from grains?
They have apple cider vinegar.
Right, and white vinegar is made chemically.
Maybe rice vinegar.
Yeah, but that's what I've looked this up once, and it might be you might be able to find some, but I've noticed that the ones that are made in brine, which are not leavened, but they are fermented, are kosher.
Yeah. Tova.
Not sure how relevant this is, but it's just sort of fascinating me, this discussion, because a lot of pastoralist groups traveled with embers in pottery so that they would have a ready source of fire. And it just strikes me that the similarity between fire, which to the eye seems to come out of nowhere, you strike a spark and a spark comes out of nowhere, and then you preserve it and carry it so that you can pass it over and over again, is very similar to this process of leavening, of storing that coming out of nowhere.
It's like that amazing scene in Castaway when Tom Hanks finally makes fire. What it means to have nothing and have once again been a human being who created fire out of nothing. It's hard to do. I don't think I could have figured it out. So
well, that's fascinating to me because we don't carry fire now. That's like in ancient times they carried fire with them. That's like a miraculous thing.
We have lighters. We don't need to. Right?
Yes.
If you don't have that, I mean, it does make some sense that you would want to not have to start from scratch every single time that you're heating something. That's really interesting. How old do we think the matches are? The notion of a this. I think it's 100 years, 300 years? You think it's 1,000?
No.
How did Maimonides make fire? Stones? I don't know. Okay. Elon's still here. Elon, 1826 is the match? Wait, microphone. We're far
the
afield, but it's
invention
fascinating.
of friction matches, as we know them today, is attributed to John Walker, a British chemist, in 1826.
Wow.
He accidentally discovered that a wooden stick coated with a mixture of antimony sulfide and potassium chlorate would ignite when rubbed against a rough surface.
That is the first time in my life I have heard the word antimony used, aside from the first word in Tom Lehrer's song, The Elements. The only thing I knew about antimony is that it was the first one that he sings. There's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selene. And besides that, I had no relationship with antimony until today.
Well, for those that are interested, there was a movie that came out several decades ago called Quest for Fire. That's all about this.
Really?
Well, it's about ancient people who didn't have matches.
Okay. Elon, where were we?
Where were we? All right. First of all, is that the same Johnny Walker from the Scotch? Because that would explain a lot.
Johnny Walker, the match guy?
Is it the Johnny Walker Blue or the Johnny Walker Green?
That's what I want to know.
That would be funny. Was he Scottish? Was he Scottish? All right. While Sue is looking that up,
right. So
anything...
7 days, you won't find chametz or some kind of leavening agent in their houses, because all those who eat the chametz will be cut off from the soul of Israel, and also from those who are converts and people who are native to the land.
Good. Let's break it down a little bit. Most people read this verse as using the word sa'or and machmetzet as utter synonyms. Machmetzet is the noun created from the root chametz, but being the thing that creates fermentation, and sa'or is just another word for it. So you shouldn't have any Sa'or found in your houses for 7 days. For anyone who eats, the Torah switches from Sa'or to Machmetzet. Anyone who eats is not, Machmetzet is not the matzah. It's the thing that produces the matzah. That person's very, very reality person, body, nefesh in biblical Hebrew means more actually body than soul, will be cut off, me'adat Yisrael, from the congregation of Israel. How do we want to handle the preposition be of bager uve'ezrach haaretz? Ilan translated exactly right. The ger is a convert, someone who is now living amongst you, even though not from you. Uve'ezrach haaretz, some other biblical way of referring to a local citizen. What is the be doing, and where in the sentence do we put in how this applies to a stranger and a citizen? What do you think, Norm? And then we'll look at some translations.
I think in theory, somebody who converts to Judaism could argue Pesach is not obligatory to me because my ancestors were not freed from slavery. But once they become a Jew, they're spiritually a Jew, they're actually a Jew, and just like all the other Jews, it's as if their ancestors, their forebears certainly, were redeemed from Egypt. And so a convert is just as obligated to observe Pesach and all the rest of the Jewish holidays as is any Jew.
Right. And so therefore, in your reading of it, the B is sort of like, and this applies also to, right? Everything the Torah just said, it's not only upon the Jew, but upon Everett Fox. I'll share the screen and then I'll hear what you have to say to Tova. Everett Fox agrees with you, Norm. Most of the readings agree. For 7 days, no leaven is to be found in your homes for whatever who eats what ferments. He's being very careful to give a different word for Sa'or and Machmetzet in English, even though it really means the same thing. That person shall be cut off from the community of Israel, whether sojourner or native of the land. So the ba as a whether. It's an odd use of ba, but that's his thought about it. Tova?
We've been alternately translating it as convert or stranger or sojourner. And correct me if I'm wrong, but biblically, it wasn't typically used to mean convert. It was more likely to be sojourner.
Correct.
It just seems odd that that would be here when such an emphasis was put that the Egyptians should in no way partake of this, even though they were living among them. And yet a stranger who's within that congregation now is obligated similarly.
Right. I think that we probably have very little understanding of what ger really meant back then, right? It's literally PhD dissertations have been done on the word ger and how it went from what it meant biblically in different stages of biblical history to the halachic concept of a Jew by choice, right? And some people don't like the fact that the Hebrew word for what we now consider to be a wonderful thing, a Jew by choice, is a word that meant stranger. But if you go into the early stages of this, it was someone who was a stranger and then decided to put his or her lot in with you. That's a beautiful thing, but started out as being not you. But it wasn't a halachic category back then. It was just those who are somehow living under the aegis of your Jewish civilization, even though they have not done whatever biblical version of conversion might have been. We don't know even know if conversion existed biblically, right? We have that one pasuk at the end of Megillat Esther that called something mityahadim, that lots of people Jewified themselves, right? It's one of the few places in the Bible where there's a verb that seems to suggest that people went from being not Jewish to Jewish. There, it was out of fear because the Jew, right? I don't think that the ger in this verse is someone who, is circumcised. Well, but circumcision aside, is thinking of himself or herself as a Jew, but is living within the rubric of Jewish life. Lots of hands. Let's go, David, Marshall, Rebecca, and then I see some hands on Zoom also.
What's the difference between ger toshav and ger tzedek?
It's very complicated. to answer. Halachically, a ger tzedek is a way of describing someone who actually has chosen Judaism and is now a righteous convert amongst us. Whereas a ger toshav was just someone who agreed to live in the Jewish camp, in the Jewish society, but was not necessarily taking upon all the obligations. But it's hard to pit those words against one another because ger toshav is a biblical term and ger tzedek is more of a halachic term. Marshall, Rebecca, and then I see Elon and Barry.
Well, Robert Alter gives a very good distinction here between the word ger and Ezrach Haaretz, where he says that the word ger, meaning sojourner, refers to one who is a resident alien, which we've just mentioned. But the word Ezrach Haaretz, he said the Hebrew reflected is native. Ezrach probably refers to a plant. Many think a grapevine. And so would be a metaphor for, and here's a word I never heard before, autochthonous, character of the native, spring from the soil and purity. And that word itself.
Wait, so what then would that mean in the verse then?
Well, let me explain what the word autochthonous means, and then you can see it then. It says of an inhabitant of a place that is indigenous rather than descended from migrants or colonists. So ger is someone who is resident alien, right? Sojourner, as opposed to someone who actually sprang from the land itself.
Interesting. Rebecca, what's that? Yeah, very relevant. Rebecca, then Elon, then Barry, and that'll probably bring us to 9:30.
What if you interpret the bet there as Edat Yisrael in these other places? So meaning we're talking, because in previous psukim, it did say various things about when you're in your home and when you're not in your home and in different places. Could it be interpreted as Adat Yisrael when they are living as gers in another place, or when they are with ezrachim of their own aretz, meaning not foreigners or whatever it's a scary word, but not others, but it still is Adat Yisrael, just whether they are living on their own somewhere.
And then the rule would be that
regardless of where you are. So if you're the diaspora of Siberia, you still.
Interesting. I don't know that there's a possibility that that's what the verse means, but it's a lovely sermon, right? Like it's a lovely little midrash that this prohibition against eating machmetzet is not place dependent. It's whether what you're saying is whether the person who is obligated to this law is living as a stranger or in your own indigenous land. Lovely. Barry, Elon.
So I look at the end of the sentence first, to be cut off from the Adat Yisrael. And that's the key thing. If you want to be part of the Adat, then you don't do these things. If it's not important to you, okay. Yeah. So the question, to be born in Israel, does that necessitate that you are an Israelite? Or you happen to be born in the land, but you're not part of the tribe. So if you're not part of the tribe, you happen to be born in Israel. Well, what do you care whether you're cut off or not? Yeah. So it has to be. This has to have meaning only to those to whom it is important to not be cut off.
It's a wonderful question, right? That if indeed the Bager Uva Ezrach Haaretz is, as most people understand it, an expansion of the people who are obligated to this rule, and therefore an expansion of the people who are subject to the punishment, why would a ger care about being nichrata me'am Yisrael, right? So it adds color and confusion to what even those relationships were back then. Elon, take us home.
All right. So in verse 15, it says, for anyone who eats leavened food, that soul shall be cut off from Israel from the first day to the seventh. And yet here in verse 19, it says that soul shall be cut off from the assembly of Israel among the convert and the native of the land. So it's the implication that that the convert and the native of the land are only obliged to do what's stated in 19, not in 15. I'm curious as to why they include the let's say converts, sojourner, stranger, however you want to interpret it, and the native of the land in 19, but don't include it in 15.
Yeah, there are two. Yeah, good pickup. There are two important distinctions between 15 and 19. One is the addition of the inclusion of the ger and the Ezrach Haaretz. The main distinction is that 15 prohibits the outcome of the chametz process, chametz, and 19 prohibits the food stuff that is the leavening agent, right? The saor and the machmetzet, and that's where Rashi is going to go. Rashi is going to he's going to focus more on that than Ezrach Haaretz. He's going to focus more on the idea that it's not just the matzah the bread you can't eat. You can't even eat the food that you wouldn't maybe have thought to eat in the first place because it's not even food stuff, but the stuff that produces the matzah, the chametz. I'm not sure anyone reads verse 19 to suggest that it's that the ger and the Ezrach Haaretz are only prohibited to eat the saor and not prohibited to eat the chametz, even though they only appear in this verse, as far as I know. Leonard.
JPS has a comment over here. By the way, the word ger, meaning proselyte, convert, is post-biblical Hebrew,
right?
According to the dictionary over here,
right? Because the concept of conversion was mostly post-biblical. Yeah.
All right. So it says here, Hebrew ger is a foreigner who has taken up permanent residence in Israel. Like his fellow Israelite, he's required to abstain from possessing leaven for this 1 week because its presence within the closely knit community interferes with the ability of others to fulfill their religious obligation. But only the Israelite has the duty to eat matzah.
As a way of deciding between 15 and 19. The question is, does the ger and the Ezrach Haaretz have to not only not have leaven in their houses, or do they also not? Can they also not have? Are they also prohibited from having chametz itself? Right? All right. Actual last comment, Norm.
Verse 15 says you can't eat it. Verse 19 says it can't be found in your premises, and it gives the punishment.
Yeah. Okay, we'll pick up next week. I'll put the dates that I mentioned in the WhatsApp chat, so make sure you look at it. Chodesh Tov, happy Sivan, early happy Shavuot, come to our Leil Tikkun. See y'all soon.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.